And for those of you attending tonight, we will be following the agenda that we had sent out. I see a good number of attendees. A reminder for folks. Hello, Holly, and welcome.
Hi, Sam. Thanks. Good to see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm good. Can you hear me? Oh, good. Yep. Oh, wonderful. Well, then we're off to a good start here, I would say. Tell me about the lighting, Holly. I've got some lighting situations.
It looks like we could have a spooky story night.
Well, that's not what we're going for.
Oh, no.
Hopefully we'll have, it's an informative night and a dialogue. We will take several forms of participation, folks. So here the reminder are: one, you can always put questions into the Q&A box down at the bottom. This is a webinar format, which makes it the most secure meeting. But it also means we can have people who have their hand raised or who chat in a question can say that they would speak. So when I do go to answer the questions, it will help me if you say in your question you're willing to speak it out, because that dialogue can make it both more interesting for those watching and listening, and then specifically can help Holly and I, not have to fill all the space with our voices. So, Holly, will you introduce yourself for those of you who might be logging in and don't know you yet?
Hello, welcome to this evening. We're going to have a lot of information tonight. My name's Holly Bell. I usually sit at the front desk in normal times. And I'm so glad that you're joining us tonight.
Nice. And then we do have, let's see, some folks who may join us later. Specifically, if my screen share doesn't work, just preparing everybody, we'll wait through it. And then our intrepid managing director, Wendy Fischer, will jump in also as a panelist and help screen share. What I'm going to do, though, here just for a moment, though, is prepare the screen share. Give me one moment. And what I'm going to go through tonight is just a quick set of announcements. Oh, good. And then we'll get to the real focus of the evening, which is the impact on our elementary programming, decision making, and planning from the state's change in health guidance. The state of Minnesota changed health guidance back on December 16th, and really, as I said earlier today, it's like they not only pulled the rug but rearranged all the furniture.
You're going in
yeah,
and
Holly.
I
am. Oh dear. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for
maybe it's me.
I don't know. Well, folks who are listening along, please put into the chat any technical difficulties if I am indeed going in and out. I can hear Sam. I can hear. Okay, good. Holly, you might need an animal on screen to make it work. Good. Thanks for the chat backup. You all are really going to be getting credits for production help. Specifically, what we're going to be doing, though, is after we make a couple announcements about upcoming important dates, we're going to be focusing on the impact on elementary planning and programming. Let's see. Wendy Fischer, if you're here and you want to be part of this first announcement for these upcoming dates, send a chat to Holly and I can promote you. And I'll get the screen going in just a moment. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Oh, good. And then, without further ado, as you know, from our agenda that we sent out, here we go, good. From our agenda that we sent out earlier today to just elementary family, I think we sent it to all families, just as a reminder of these forums. We do have an agenda for tonight, and so the first announcement is not related specifically to the elementary program, but is related. Oh, there we go. But it is related to some important work that we're doing also. One moment, let me promote. Holly, can you see the screen? Let me know, Holly, when you start seeing my projected screen. And I'm going to promote Wendy Fischer so that Wendy can help make this first announcement of the evening. And then I think 6:10 to 6:15 we'll get to the elementary information. Oh, here we go. Good. All right, and so for those of you who are attending and maybe haven't had the honor and pleasure of meeting Wendy Fischer yet, Wendy Fischer is our managing director, joined Great River School this year in that role, and supports specifically managers of programs in a mentorship and coaching role, and then also is really our point person for their successful on-site operating an SRC program. Hi, Wendy, welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, great. So Wendy and Holly, can you see this dates and timeline for Community Voices screen? Does that show up for you all? Okay, great. Okay, so I'll just give a slight intro, and then Wendy, you can take us through these dates. For those of you who perhaps didn't catch it, at the start of December, Jenny Kordowski, our previous Student Wellness and Equity Coordinator, departed for other endeavors. And so we are looking at ways to assess how to best fill that equity and wellness coordinator role. And we are not only committed to filling it, but we want to make sure that after it has existed for close to 2 years, we want to get feedback from our community on how that works. And so Wendy is taking the lead on scheduling times and hosting times for feedback sessions. Wendy, anything you want to say?
Everyone can read the screen. As you can see, we have a timeline laid out for getting stakeholder feedback and for the hiring process. We're really grateful to have Equity Alliance Minnesota partnering with us on this, because this is such a critical and pivotal position at our school. And they are helping us facilitate some listening sessions with students, with families, and with faculty. And we're also hosting some in-house administrative listening sessions. The one thing that's missing from this screen is that we are also posting internally to promote some of our current faculty who wish to, for the remainder of the time before we get to hire somebody new, who wish to fulfill some of these duties for compensation. And so particularly focusing on the student-facing roles, we want to make sure that the students don't lose out on the benefits of having this BIPOC and student wellness and equity position. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone wants to. I don't know, Sam, I think you can see Q&A, and then you could let me know if there
Sure. Well, and I'll just also mention that 2 weeks from today, our family forum focus, as it says here, will be on equity and wellness. And specifically, it's not only about our coordinator role, but on some long developing work, both with Equity Alliance Minnesota, and then specifically our school community now has not only the opportunity, but the state mandate to host an American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. And so I've talked about that a little bit in December, but the active invitations for that committee go out this week. And we really are looking forward to also using that, though, as an opportunity to also host parent advisory committees for other identities and backgrounds that may have historically been underserved by education. And so we'll be talking about that specifically. And then one thing that I noticed, we're trying to fit a lot of information on a single intro slide here, but we wanted to make this announcement to make sure folks have a heads up on looking for this information. Equity Alliance Minnesota is the group that facilitated the educational equity survey that so many families and students participated in last month. And they will be coming back likely to one of these forums, I believe in later this year, to give some feedback on what they found. And it's really a long-term partnership. So we're not looking to sort of be done with this. This is a foundation for long-term growth and planning for us. So those sessions for families and faculty for this, February 1st to the end of March, we will be posting the Student Wellness and Equity Coordinator role by February 1st, but our feedback and work on that is going to be ongoing in terms of participating in that process of hiring someone and doing the equity and wellness work at school.
I'm glad, Sam, I'm glad you mentioned the long-term partnership, because that's one of the areas of feedback that we've gotten from our faculty, both our white identifying and BIPOC faculty, is that a way to build trust in the community is to establish long-term partnerships that are working toward equity versus, you know, the shiny new thing every year.
Right, right. So, well, great. Okay, well, thanks, Wendy. Thanks for joining. I'll keep us on the agenda for the elementary presentation. But just a heads up to everybody attending, 2 weeks from today, we will be focusing on generally equity and wellness at this forum. Let's see. Wendy, you chat me if you want to remain a panelist and go video off or not. But I'll start presenting and we'll see how it goes from there. Again, folks who want to ask questions as we go with this presentation, questions in the Q&A are easiest for me to track. You can chat other information if it doesn't feel necessarily pointed like a question. And please, if you're willing to talk out loud or get promoted like Wendy to talk on video even, let us know in the chat, and I'm looking forward hopefully to a dialogue. And so without further ado, here we are going to talk about, I guess I would say, a preview to the promised message of how will we use the survey data and what's going to be happening in regards to our school response to the changed health and safety guidelines released on December 16th by the state. And so what we're looking at really on today, January 5th, is a status report. And on the 7th, there will be a little bit more specific information, and likely this presentation itself sent out to all elementary families and shareable by the community to see where we're going and what we're thinking about this. And so we want to just start by identifying what has happened this year. Specifically, we are taking family feedback, and we've been taking it since last July, I believe. We have been making decisions based on data available, best practices, health science and epidemiological data available, and then specifically also groups made up of students, faculty, community members have set achievable dates to evaluate health data and make the best decision available for Great River School. When this presentation comes out, we wanted to offer, I would say, a pretty thorough one-page timeline of the last 6 months of education-related pandemic developments that have affected Great River School. So I won't read through this, but I will identify that in December, the governor did announce on December 16th a fairly drastic change to the health and safety guidance for elementary students. I'll talk about why we think that happened, but I likened it today to not just like moving a rug out from where you're standing, but then rearranging all the furniture in the room also. And so we were under a timeline to respond to that and gather information pretty quickly at a time in which we envisioned very few, both faculty and families, really engaging between, say, December 19th and January 3rd. So while it was a 2.5-week period, it's just 2 or 3 working days for our staff. And so we did move quicker than usual to get a survey out to y'all. And then just, again, a reminder of the planning and preparation here that we took part in the summer. At the top of this slide here, you can see the graphic that we used to explain how we're going to go through the summer and plan to engage in learning in school. Again, the graphic there with the lists, and then the hexagon shape there of the working groups that have continued to meet throughout this past fall, and we'll meet again in the spring. And then the metrics we've been using and the options we've been giving family. At the bottom of this slide, I'll just remind folks that we did commit to ongoing reevaluation of our models throughout the school year. And while the December 16th announcement pressed us to send a survey out, I'd say about a month earlier than regular, we will, again, you can expect that we will likely then assess models again between now and the beginning of April, and even again between April and July. So that was our best guess then, and I think it holds. The big change would be that we already did publish one set of benchmarks and health and safety guidelines in a speedometer and chart form. Specifically, however, I want to identify that as we look at this chart now with the change guidance for elementary school, we're really being pressed to both take in new data and perspectives from families and staff in light of the new guidance, and then go and really revise with responsibility and with the needs of students in mind that chart. And so that's something I'll talk about too quite soon. And so just a reminder that our school mission guides us. So especially as students' needs are divergent. Without a pandemic, students' needs can be divergent also. And so how to meet that diversity of needs is one of the bases for our motivation as a Montessori school, and is also really a motivation for our equity, racial justice, and social justice mission as a school. Specifically, though, we set health and safety, relationships, the learning success of students, and meeting state guidelines as 4 necessary components of our COVID response. And all of that is on a foundation of thinking about how do we center the needs of students, and how do we prioritize our students, meeting our students' needs, so that equity and justice are at the center of our decision-making and viewpoint. And I think that gathering voices is a necessary part of that. And so the voices of family and the voices of faculty are necessary for us to be able to make decisions. I want to explain that the survey that we sent out gave us really useful, I would say the most actionable information of any of the surveys we've sent so far. And specifically, I recognize that we asked families and faculty to make a difficult choice between 2 divergent models of in-person learning and or distance learning, where neither seemed to be perfect. And the truth of the matter is, as we've been analyzing what's realistic to present, we know that it's not possible to have, say, one educator do everything in all models. I'll get to more of that later, but I wanted to identify that it was important also, and it's been important for us to have surveys that correlate to student names and email addresses and phone numbers of families and parents, so that we can really respond individually to the feedback, to the necessary sometimes responses and or learning that we do about how to best meet individual needs, and that we can follow up if a family hasn't answered a survey. And so we did try to put a lot into the survey that we sent out, and I just want to identify that. We've also learned a lot about that process, and I look toward us not repeating the kind of difficult choice without enough context that I believe we sent out. So again, just a reminder that on this slide at the bottom there, if I move my cursor, you can see it again. We are reevaluating learning models both at a regular interval and then also when we get new information. And so moving on, we specifically want to just remind everyone, whether you're a student, whether you're a family member, whether you're a community member, whether you're a faculty member, that the ears of the school live in all of the different places we try to make available a place where you as a community member can speak and be heard. And so there's an open invitation. We've done our best to have both the office at email and then this direct line, this phone number here listed to be in many emails and at the end of many messages. Really, you may text or call that line, you may email that office at email, and we are taking that information in and doing our best to respond actively to it. Also, listening sessions that are outside of the family forum, working groups that have been formed this past summer and are continuing to work can still be joined. We have board committee meetings, and our school board is the real governance structure that makes decisions for how the school operates. My job as the employee of the board is to manage within our school mission, vision, and values under the parameters the board has set, manage the challenges we face. And so we're not a monarchy, I'm not a royalty, and we do really, really need the participation of both family and faculty and employees and students, everyone who's affected by how this operation works. So just reminders here of how you can speak up. And then secondly, I just want to get ahead of myself on purpose to say, what are the takeaways that I'm about to present? You may have tuned in, and the summary takeaway here would be this. Based on both the best available health data we have, based on the most available data we have about what will best serve our students and their education because of our preparedness, both with health and safety and our pedagogy and our educational preparedness, and with now the feedback from our faculty, our staff, and our families based on the educational model that they said they're interested in engaging in from that survey sent in December. We will be continuing with the distance learning program we planned right now through February 24th. So all of what we've been calling cycle 3. Secondly, as an addendum to that first point, I want to say the 6 weeks that we committed to at the beginning of the year, where I've been saying we won't be choosing models overnight. We'll give you a 6-week notice if we're going to change models. That's something we will stay committed to. And so at this point, you may be wondering, well, then why did you send that survey back on December 18th about changing models? Specifically, we needed to know if the perspectives of our families had drastically changed or not. And I'll get to that a little bit more, but I want to just say right now, if you've got to tune out or you're just listening to the first bit of this presentation, one takeaway is that we're in distance learning and we will stay there. We'll make an announcement 6 weeks ahead of time if we're going to shift our school model at all. Secondly, the lower elementary age group in particular has the most reliable data about health and safety guidelines that we believe will allow us to expand the Student Resource Center for lower elementary students just as soon as we can staff it. And then third, that we want to be clear that we require now, I think, clearer and more specific benchmarks and next steps that would be needed to move from where we are to an on-site in-person learning model. So I'm going to go over those in more detail, but if you say tuned in specifically just to find out what the takeaways were, those were them. And so now if you've got to get up, you got to go get a snack, you've got to go attend to something, you've got to put out a literal or emotional fire at your house, you could walk away and come back in 20 minutes for questions and answers. I'm now going to move into a little bit more detail about why these are the takeaways and then some of the survey data. So specifically, why continue with distance learning? Specifically, we are looking at how to best, again, meet the divergent needs of our students. And while we know on-site learning is a most effective model, we have to make sure that we are prepared for the health and safety guidelines. And secondly, that we don't serve some students at the cost of serving others. And so we need time to prepare new benchmarks with this new guidance in order to do in-person learning. So that's what I'll say, and I'll answer questions a little bit later that probably touches more on that. The second issue would be, why expand the lower elementary student resource center? Well, specifically, the new health and safety guidance, we do believe gives us an opportunity to best serve the students who are interested in showing up in person to do their distance learning. And that will require that we hire on-site staff so that the current classroom assistants and classroom guides are not trying to stretch themselves between two very different jobs and tasks throughout the learning day. And so it will take time to do that. I look forward, just as soon as we have that first benchmark cleared of knowing the timeline of that, to making an announcement about when we can expand. Right now, our Student Resource Center for all ages, 1st through 12th grade, can only accept the students who are children or students in families where both caretakers are critical workers who need to be outside of the home. I know for some students right now, either educators or other critical workers who have been working at home are being asked to now work outside of the home. So we are always ready to take the children of critical workers, students of critical workers who need to work outside of the home. So just contact us in order to do that. But what we're looking to do for the lower elementary is be able to take more students than that. So students from families who just want to send their students. I'll be able to announce a date on that when we know that we have additional staff hired, trained, and ready to operate that expanded SRC program safely. And then what do I mean and why be clear about benchmarks? So specifically, I saw a lot of concern based on the details we had shared about that one drastic scenario that we emailed out back in December. And we want to give clear steps so that you know what you would anticipate in a move from distance learning to in-person learning. I'll say a little bit more about this as we go through the survey data, but if we have shared definitions, if we understand shared timelines, and we know what measures we'll be using to know if it's safe to go back to learning in person, it'll be much easier, I think, for longer time periods to be allotted for us to answer questions you might have, and for longer time periods to be allotted for you as families and students to know what to expect if there is a change. So again, we're not currently changing our model of how to deliver education. We are quickly looking to expand our lower elementary student resource center to accept additional students outside of that critical worker criteria. And we are looking to use the new health and safety guidance for elementary age students, specifically ages 6 to 10, to go and revise our benchmarks clearly so that you can know and we can be clear ahead of time with this new health and safety data, how we'll make that decision. So now we're moving into a third part of the presentation. specifically, what was the survey data? We have survey data ready for a deep dive, and I will share all of it actually when we send out our information to all families on Thursday. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into a deep dive of all the 3 surveys we released, but I will do a detailed synopsis here of the faculty and family data that we took from our December 18th survey. And I know, I just want to say again, that it was not a perfect survey, and it did require difficult choices, limited choices, and perhaps not even choices that aligned with what you wanted to answer. By design, we were trying to give realistic choices for what could happen if we were pressed by the community to move quickly into an in-person model. So with that as a preface, I will identify here that our staff survey was designed to understand capacity of what kind of model we could deliver. And our family survey was designed to understand the choices that families would make in a difficult situation. We had 100% family contact, so every single family member has either spoken with us by phone or been called or filled out the survey by the deadline. 94% of our families, of all the students in the elementary, 94% of those students have an answer in our survey, and the other 6% we're continuing to call and try to connect with to get those answers. Our staff survey of about 50 people, 36 have responded, and then we're working, so it's actually a little bit higher response rate than is listed there, but we're working with the last 14 people to give them an opportunity to answer also. And here's what that data looked like. As a whole elementary, the family data showed about half of our whole population, a little bit less, was interested in in-person learning given the options we provided. And then about half, a little less than half, said no, they'd like to stay in distance learning. I would say, though, what's consistent among the lower and upper L is about 10% either gave both answers for students, and so we're calling to verify that, and or it hadn't answered yet. Now, again, this isn't a majority rules election of what we do. This is important, though, to know that our families and our community of students as a whole and caregivers are still, I would say, quite tightly wrapped on all sides of this difficult issue of how do we best serve our students, how do we best serve community safety, and what are the priorities that we do first in a situation where no one has perfect information. So secondly, with faculty, I wanted to share that a little bit more than half, but effectively half of our faculty said that they were prepared to work in person. About 35% of our faculty, close to 40%, said that they were able but reticent to show up in person. And I think that's important too, to know what do we have to provide to our faculty in terms of information, training, preparedness, and I think really reliable dialogue so that our faculty are prepared to deliver a good learning model. And then again, we have a couple of faculty who have dependents who are medically vulnerable, and a couple of faculty who are medically vulnerable themselves, and those are the red slices that you see there. Specifically broken up by lower and upper elementary, what I see here, and the reason that this is different from the preview that I gave, I believe, a week ago, is that many late respondents to the survey, so folks who filled it out, say the 30th and the 1st, and even on the 2nd of January, answered distance learning. So that really swung our answers back. Also, many families who had originally said yes, they would come in person, actually went back and changed their answers to be distance learning. And so what you can see here is that many more about half the upper elementary families actually identified that they would prefer to stay in distance learning. And just over half of the lower L families said that they would prefer in-person learning. And so what now? How do we use that survey data? Well, one is that we see that our distance learning model is the most reliable, consistent, and I think important way to make sure that we're still serving the learning needs of students. Secondly, we have a 6-week minimum lead time for any change to our model. And I want to make that clear that, again, we're going to do our best to communicate well with you. And I'm hoping that there are no more unforeseen curves in the road from, say, government guidance or mandates. But what I do look forward to is being able to anticipate how to communicate best with our whole community about that. Now, given the data that we've gathered, we are committed to assess our learning criteria and our health and safety criteria to include this new Minnesota guidance. And so we're going to make really clear benchmarks for both how, when, and if a move to in-person makes sense. I'll share those benchmarks in a moment. And then the real takeaway is that there are enough lower elementary, especially families who want to participate with an in-person model of any kind. And we do believe that we have the health and safety guidance and clarity to be able to provide that lower elementary SRC expansion in a safe way on campus. And so as soon as we can staff that model without disrupting the work of current guides and current classroom assistants and in our current specialists and special education staff and deliverers, we want to make sure that we do that expansion just as soon as we're able for the lower elementary to start with. And so those benchmarks look like this. They climb. They don't go in a downhill motion. It's going to take work to move from benchmark 1, which is integrating the safety and preparedness guidelines, which from the state of Minnesota, you can find it in many other places, so I won't belabor this point, but it's that we have on-site testing every 2 weeks for staff, which is not perfect, but does give us a view of how prevalent the virus is in terms of an asymptomatic state among adults who are on staff. Secondly, we have new guidance and tested out guidance that, again, not the Department of Health, but the Department of Health has given us a lot of information to show that when you wear both a mask and a face shield as an adult, you're much more protected. So it's up to us to identify how to best implement that new guidance to best help keep our staff safe on campus and able to do their jobs. And then in terms of safety and preparedness, we are seeking out the best data and most clear data available, but younger students, especially in ages 9 and under, have a lower prevalence currently to both contracting and passing on the COVID contagion. And now that could change with new variants, that could change with new data or new information, but working with the best data we have is our responsibility to set a clear benchmark for that, just the way we did with the speedometer and the old health benchmarks. Secondly, we need to make sure staffing is prepared. Just like I said, we will have to engage with hiring additional qualified staff to be able to do this dynamic expansion we're talking about of the lower elementary SRC. And then we'll have to assess how we can staff an in-person model once we know that it's safe. Third, we got to make sure our learning environment is prepared. So you're getting an idea here of, after implementing safety guidelines and staffing and then preparing the classroom for Montessori learning, why it can't happen really any quicker at all than 6 weeks. And so again, we haven't made an announcement or a decision because we've got to set clear benchmarks for each of these that are clear for everyone and met before we announce a change. And that fourth, the student impact. So I know that families will continue to choose distance learning, whether it's 6 weeks or 2 months or longer from now when we are able to implement in-person learning. For those families who keep choosing distance learning, we want to make sure that the quality of a student education and the needs of the student education are comparable to what we're currently providing. So after those benchmarks are met, we would be ready to start a rolling start to in-person learning. And specifically what that means is we will begin when we're ready. The reason this benchmarks aren't timelines yet, again, is because we have to set clear criterion that have the buy-in from our community for these new benchmarks. And these are equivalent to the kinds of benchmarks that were cases per 10,000 related before. And I'll get to that in the Q&A. Again, in any of these models, and what we'll get to in a moment, is that once we update the benchmarks in those areas, we'll have to work together to meet the needs of our students. And that means that the timelines for these benchmarks will be set when we have the best information available to process how to integrate this new standard. And then secondly, our understanding is that upper elementary age students at this point and adolescent students are in a different health category for the behavior of the virus. And we are in touch with both the Department of Health, pressing them for the best information and rationale we can, the Department of Education, pressing them for the best information and rationale we can, and really looking to make sure that we understand as a community that the focus for the first implementation of these benchmarks is lower elementary. And so for upper elementary, you do expect not only for distance learning to continue through cycle 3, but likely for longer than the lower elementary distance learning would continue in the long-term future. So what does it successfully look like to prepare for on-site learning? Like I've been saying, there's a first phase, which is expanding the SRC for lower elementary. And specifically, the next phase, a separate second phase, for in-person instruction would be, again, announced 6 weeks before it happens. We'd be meeting all the benchmarks that I had mentioned, and it would be because guides who are now focusing on distance learning would have that 6 weeks of notice to change their focus to the on-site instructors, and that the distance learning at that point in phase 2 would shift. And so that's something that was in the survey that I know troubled a lot of families. And I just want to be clear, we know that educators cannot both successfully do distance learning and in-person instruction. And so we are committed to making sure that our distance learners, if their guides go to in-person instruction, still have conferences with those guides, still stay connected to their classroom community through attending community meetings and work groups virtually. But we want to supplement the instruction with expert distance learning instructors who are Montessori trained, so that the quality of the education accessible to anyone who continues in distance learning, again, this could be in 2 months, this could be in 6 months, this could be when we move to distance learning and those benchmarks are met. We want to make sure that the quality of that instruction for distance learners stays at a high level. And then we will be following safety guidelines for as long as they exist. So the COVID guidelines on quarantine and the COVID guidance for transportation and any other guidance that applies will be followed. So there are some frequently asked questions I'd like to get to. I see right here a couple questions, folks asking a Q&A, and I think that now that I see the Q&A that's live, spending just about 5 more minutes on these frequently asked questions. We'll address many of the common questions, and then I'll get to the specific that have been asked here. And so again, if you've got questions that are coming to mind or something that I've brushed over maybe faster than you would prefer, put that into the Q&A here. If you're willing to talk, again, raise your hand, and I can see the list of folks with their hands raised and welcome you into a dialogue. And then if you do have some things that you're, say, putting into the chat, that's an okay place to put them, but it'll be a harder place for me to engage with tracking that question down. In any case, here we go. Frequently asked questions. So we've broken these frequently asked questions into 3 main categories. One is planning and logistics. The second is learning and teaching. And the third is health and safety. And so if you'll just for a moment bear with me, I have to do a virtual teaching faux pas and make sure that my Wi-Fi internet doesn't shut down from low battery. One moment. Okay, thank you for living with me, everybody, throughout the real pandemic. Here we go. So in these 3 categories, here are the frequently asked questions that I'll endeavor to answer now. Very common question is, why would you go straight, say, from the distance learning we're doing to an in-person model? Why not trial a hybrid model? And so the short of it is, throughout the, let's see, 12.5 school districts where I've had the opportunity to have an in-depth conversation and informational interview with the school leader or the principal at other sites. So 17 folks that I've been able to talk to in depth. And throughout our research, we've identified that implementing a hybrid model is not only no easy task, but is often really disrupts the quality of education for both on-site and distance learners. And so educators doing 2 different jobs is not a realistic strategy in order to solve the problem of how do we improve education for kids. And there's more, I would say, it's not just 2 separate jobs, but more than twice the complexity to try to meet the needs of both distance learners and on-site learners. And so we're not looking at trialing a hybrid model at this point. We are looking at staffing appropriately to meet the divergent needs of our current community. Secondly, why are we talking about sending students back to school when we're in the middle of an active pandemic? I think this is not only a reasonable question, but one of the most common sense places to begin. I will identify that the announcement on December 16th by the governor of Minnesota was really, could have been, say, a 3-day workshop on how, why, and when. It, in fact, was, I believe, 6 minutes or less of the announcement made on that 1 p.m. December 16th news conference. And what we've learned since then through our research, through talking with the Department of Education and Health, and then also looking at the scientists and health experts who have advised the state of Minnesota, is that the best data currently shows that ages 9 or 10 and younger have a much lower incidence and likelihood of either contracting the contagion, passing on COVID to adults, or being vectors of passing the disease to each other and bringing it home. And so on that basis alone, the Department of Health also knows that the prevalence of COVID-19 in the state of Minnesota is looking to not only be currently high, but it will remain high in populated areas for quite some time, meaning the cases per 10,000 model that was previously being used, where we were being told to see 30 cases per 10,000 or 20 cases per 10,000 as a way to measure safety in our classrooms, is going to stay high and actually doesn't accurately tell you how safe your elementary classroom is. So the combination of the low incidence of contagion being passed by those younger students, age 10 and under, combined with the knowledge that infection rates per 10,000 will likely remain high and don't correlate to classrooms, means that the state changed its guidance and then left it to schools to explain to the community how and why we would adjust our behavior. So while we are in an active pandemic, I believe what's being weighed here is the cost to children in not being able to be in person, especially our youngest students, versus how can we measure local health data. And so I'll get to this in a moment about how we're testing on site and other safety measures, but I believe that we're talking about students going back to school because the state is saying, measure locally the safety of your elementary classroom, and if you can implement that model safely, then do so. Okay, so teaching and learning questions, learning and teaching. 1, will the classrooms look how we expect Montessori classrooms to be? What about shared spaces like bathrooms? So this is where the manual that we sent out at the beginning of the year, all of those safety protocols not only are enforced, but secondly, in terms of shared spaces like bathrooms, I'm starting with the second half of this question first, we are going to go back and look at the newest health guidance and make sure that we keep the most stringent health guidance that is applicable for the ages we have. And we would manage those shared spaces like bathrooms, hallways, drinking fountains, the way that we've managed them currently. And successfully we've managed where even when there are positive COVID cases on site, we don't have any evidence that there's been any community transmission of those cases because we believe of our mitigation practices so far. Secondly, when we go back for in-person instruction from trained Montessori guides, like the ones who are your students' guides now, the classrooms would look like Montessori classrooms. For the expansion of our Student Resource Center, the classrooms will not look like traditional Montessori classrooms. So we are expanding the Resource Center so that students can get classroom experience, the socialization of learning in a group, but they will still be receiving distance learning lessons from their guides as we do distance learning. When we shift the model through a big announcement and very clear benchmark meeting criteria, that's when we will shift to on-site Montessori instruction. Secondly, if our family decides to remain in distance learning, would my student be assigned a different guide? As long as we're doing our instructions for distance learning, your student will be receiving instruction from the classroom guide you've come to know and respect and understand and love. If we move to in-person instruction because we've met all the benchmarks, and then your family still decides to be in distance learning, that's okay. We aim to have them still be connected to the classroom community through virtual attendance, to community meetings and groups. We still also intend to have them connect with their known classroom guide and assistant for student conferences and providing that time for teachers to do those conferences. But we want to be really clear that at a certain point over the long term, and I'm asking really everyone here to take a long-term understanding view of the divergent needs of all students, that if your family needs to stay in distance learning and we've met those other benchmarks though, and we can benefit students by having them do in-person instruction, we are going to make sure that the highest quality direct instruction available that we can possibly find is available to your distance learner as a supplement to the learning relationship they have with their teacher. So we're not trying to replace that relationship, but we're making a realistic understanding that the classroom teacher cannot continue to do both in-person instruction and distance learning at a high level of success. I know there are questions. I'm going to get to them pretty quick. but I'll finish with these three really common questions about health and safety. One, what sort of COVID testing would the community have access to? Right now, we have access to testing for all employees every 2 weeks, starting Monday the 18th. I wish it was more. I understand that is not at the rate that can prevent necessarily all community spread and infection among our staff who might be exposed in the community, but it does give us a baseline to know if the virus has prevalence among our adult staff and could give early indicators on how we can take steps to prevent that spread. What social distancing and guidelines would be enforced? One is that masks and shields are something we're looking to implement very soon on campus for anyone working directly with students, and that we will follow the distancing guidelines released by the Department of Health. And three, would staff be vaccinated before and return to in-person learning? And so I will be very clear here that we as a school administration are nowhere near the front of the line to get information about vaccines, though I call often, and we're trying to get as far really into the information availability as we can. I look forward to learning when we can access a vaccine for all of our educators. I know educators are near the top tier for who's going to get the vaccine, but there are no current dates about when we get it. Secondly, our current benchmarks that we need to assess about starting with lower elementary learning, those 4 benchmarks I talked about, we haven't yet established how or if a vaccine is part of those metrics. And I just need us all to understand that a vaccine, while it is a critical tool in fighting the long-term impact of this contagion among humanity, is not the end of the story. A vaccine is not a simple snap your fingers and now everyone's ready to go back to work and back to school in person. A vaccine, while important, requires additional safety practices, additional mitigation, probably the continuance of both masks and shields, at least for this year. In addition, the continuance of social distancing and really thorough hygiene and sanitary practices. And so the anxiety about returning to school for families and students is also not solved by adults getting a vaccine. And we expect that the pandemic will continue for many months. And so we need to assess the safety of educating our students, and a vaccine is a part of that, but not the simple yes/no switch. So we have to establish whether even not a vaccine is the deciding factor in one of our benchmarks, much less a component of it. And so currently we've been successful at limiting community spread of the virus, as I've said. And what we're really going to look to do is double down on both the analysis of our safety practices, the analysis of the new guidance, the incorporation of vaccines and when we might get them, and then really understanding that educating our students, a vaccine may allow us to do it easier, but is not necessarily the only deciding factor in how we go forward. And so I just want to, before I go into the Q&A, again, identify the takeaways here are that we're going to continue in distance learning. You will have a 6-week timeline for any major shift in elementary programming models. And our distance learning that we continue with right now is with your classroom guide, just as the cycle 3 has begun here. We will be working to expand the lower elementary specifically, years 1, 2, and 3, Student Resource Center, to be able to take in additional students who are wanting to and willing to come to school for their distance learning. And then 3, 4, we're going to establish really clear benchmarks based on this new data we've taken in. So only a couple minutes behind the agenda schedule. Well, maybe more than a couple, but I will at this point stop screen sharing and look for our wonderful co-host Holly Bell, I believe, is ready to come back. It sometimes works better for everybody to have Holly be able to read questions. And then I know Wendy Fischer is here on stage left, and so Wendy, you can always chime in if you've got an additional answer to share also, but no pressure to turn on the camera at this point. So Holly, I see some questions in the Q&A.
Yes.
Will you ask that first question that's typed out? And while I answer it, could you scan the chat and see if there are questions in there? Because I think there might be.
I don't, okay, here it is. From Tom King.
Okay, great.
What percentage of faculty are unable to wear both mask and face shield due to medical and other conditions?
Let's see, what percentage, percentage of faculty. Currently, I am not aware of any faculty who are unable to wear both mask and face shield due to medical conditions. I'll just keep it direct.
Okay, that was good.
Okay.
We do have some in the chat.
Oh, great.
So when you were back at your slides, Paul McNiff said, I'm trying to make sure I heard correctly. Did you say that 94% of the families filled out the survey? And
We have, yeah, so we have approximately 63 to 65 students per grade in 1st through 6th grade. And so for all of those approximately 385 students, yes, we have 94% of those students have answered, meaning we don't have answers for approximately, at this point, I believe, just under 20 students. So
okay.
This is the largest rate of response, though I will identify the largest rate of response, and one of the critical decisions we had to make back in the summer was whether to continue with anonymous, open anonymous surveys or surveys tied to individuals. And what we found is that we're actually able to respond to individual needs, questions, and concerns, and then reach out to folks who haven't filled it out, only because we can track that, though. That doesn't mean of all parents, 94% filled it out. It means for a single student getting at least one answer, 94% of them did fill it out.
So that slightly answers this next question from Paul.
Oh, great.
How did several families fill out both answers for their child?
Both answers. So we live in a situation in which the way that we compiled that survey data is that sometimes a student with two caregivers, those caregivers, whether they live in the same household or not, filled out the same answer. And so we counted that as one answer for that student. Some students, whether their caregivers live in the same household or different households, sometimes have conflicting answers between those parents. And so we have to do the work of finding out if those conflicting answers will stand, or if those caregivers or parents will in fact coordinate their answer to be one answer for that student. I hope that wasn't too confusing from the reality of running a school.
Thank you. A couple more questions from Paul. Will teachers be offered a vaccine before entering into an in-school model, which you already answered, but the second part of the question is, what is the metric for a safe environment in the first metric?
So those benchmarks that I was identifying are specific to the category, but we have not set the standard for what that means for that new benchmark. Some of you can go on our current website, greatriverschool.org/return right now, and you can see that the metrics that we had published have a speedometer at top and then a chart that correlates only to cases per 10,000. And what I'm saying is that the new safety benchmark will have to incorporate this new guidance and the new data we've taken in because we know, because we have new, better information that we have to incorporate. So I don't have a definitive answer on the vaccine, as I spoke about a little bit before, and I don't have the definitions of the safety standards because we have to go analyze and revise what we currently have. So we currently have very stringent safety measures, and that's what's actually preventing us from opening the lower elementary SRC up until this point.
Well, just to chime in, one of the reasons that we quickly made the decision that we weren't going to race toward the January 18th date is that gives us the opportunity to observe other districts and schools opening and learn from them, and also give us time to see where like the new COVID task force federally, as well as like Osterholm and our own Minnesota folks are coming up with new guidelines based on the data that they can gather.
Yeah, and I do want to identify that we are in a situation again where I believe it's useful to understand that there isn't one right answer that everyone agrees on. There isn't even one right answer that experts agree on. And so we have families who are, again, I would say tightly wrapped, believing in one priority is the most important for them. And what that leaves us as a community is that divergent priorities mean that we're going to not only observe and learn from other schools, but I do believe families may be able to observe what's happening also in society and other schools. And you as a family have the opportunity to let us know if you've changed or something is changing. I think that's what happened with our survey I sat here a week ago and so told everyone we're about 1/3 come back, 1/3 come back if it's safe, 1/3 not come back. And that has changed because you all changed your answers in the last week.
Would you like to go back to Q&A?
Yes, please, Holly.
There are some still in chat that I'll get back to. Dawn asks,
Great.
what will busing look like? Will children be able to socially distance on the bus?
So busing actually has new, very specific guidance. One example of that new, very specific guidance is that now assigned limited seating is required. And then a second new point of guidance is that 6 feet of distance has been published to be required now for all students. I'm verifying because prior to this, it was a guideline, and then seat spacing was enough. There was also some different guidelines for students from the same household who clearly aren't 6 feet apart all day at home. And so if and when we not only expand the SRC, but if and when we go back to distance learning or to in-person learning, move from distance learning, we understand that accommodating those new transportation standards is frankly a whole puzzle unto itself. And so I would put that in the learning environment category. We have to make sure our learning environment is prepared, including transportation.
Thank you. The Gessner family says, thanks for the information sharing tonight. Wondering if there are any explanations for the lower response rate for staff.
The lower response rate. Oh, well, so what I identify, and I don't want to overemphasize this, but we were given brand new information the afternoon of the 16th at a time in which, at that point, we were less than 2 working days away from staff, really probably more than at any other time in my career in education, looking forward to a completely unplugged time away from their job during the winter break. And so I would identify that the staff response rate probably also has to do with sending out that staff survey early in the morning on the 17th, but not being able to provide a workday time to fill it out. And so we try to avoid that, but sometimes it's necessary. And so I'm following up though with the 14 folks who didn't fill it out. So just to be super clear, that 70% is 36 folks filled it out, I believe. Yeah. Okay. So it's changing. It's lifetime changing as people fill it out now. So we though are following up with everybody who's there
so
to make sure that everybody.
Just another clarification on that. During this week, as people have returned to work, they're getting their questions answered, and they're having, team meetings with Jean and, question and answer sessions. And so I think there was also a lot of mixed feelings. Like, I want to teach my children face-to-face. I don't have enough information. I can't fill out my survey. So I think that now being able to be in rooms and talk to, rooms and talk to one another is helping to create some clarity.
Yeah. So I'll just say it's 7:01 p.m. I'm staying to answer all the questions, and including I'm just wondering if maybe tonight's the night when someone wants to speak at the meeting, which would be really exciting. But I know could happen. But those of you who may depart, I want to identify that every single question asked in the survey is going to be answered in writing. And then when it's sent out to you on the 7th, we've already started on this draft, you'll be able to search a document and find the answer to the question. And so if you're nervous about maybe not seeing all the info, this isn't your last and only time to see it. This recording will be available even. So if you got to go for dinner time, bedtime, pet time, mammal time, anytime, you can go do that now. And while we will continue, you can also listen to the podcast version of this, soon to be published on our website tomorrow. So
back to the chat. Will students of essential workers be able to return in person, both elementary and adolescent?
Yes, and in fact, they can return when, Wendy?
Now, today.
Right now, yeah. So if you're a critical worker who's a caregiver to a student, and you have to work outside of the home, you let us know right now, and we make space. We're prepared to accommodate your student safely on campus right now.
Email src@greatriverschool.org if you have questions about it.
Yep. And then just as a reminder to everybody, in every single Thursday family communication, we have the sign up form for the SRC down at the bottom. So if you want to sign up for the Student Resource Center, AKA the SRC, you fill out that form at the bottom. And if you can't find it, no worries, email us and we'll answer your questions.
And if you don't qualify under that particular rationale, you are welcome to reach out to your level social worker if you feel as if your student is not learning well at home or you have extenuating circumstances, and then we do make exceptions when students are not succeeding at home.
Yep. And I see a question coming up about, can you define critical? And this is one of the few areas where we actually don't define that status. The state of Minnesota has published, and so I would advise that in one of the governor's executive orders, there is a list that goes on now for many pages, but it's a critical worker. Back in March and April, it was tier 1 and 2, and they did away with that. Now it's just a critical worker. It's in several different sectors and many jobs. So if you search that, say on the internet for Minnesota critical worker category, you'll find that accurate list. We'll also link that though in this Thursday's communication with everybody. If you're not a critical worker, you probably don't know it. And if you are a critical worker, you probably do know it.
Back to the Q&A. Could you briefly repeat how the survey answers changed in the last week?
Oh, sure. And I'll, I have some learners at home who are doing distance learning. And I believe the whiteboard where I had it all drawn up last week has been used for critical learning Mad Libs. So what I'll say is that last week I reported that many more families, about 2/3 were saying that they wanted in-person learning. And over the last few days of the survey, over the last week, several percentage points at the least, a contingent of families went in and changed their answers from yes, I'm ready to go in person to no, I'll opt for distance learning. And I would say a large sector of those answers that swung from distance learning or from in-person learning to distance learning, a large contingent of that are families who identified that actually, when pressed to think about it, they would rather keep their child home until they have more assurances, both for other families' safety and or security and or staff safety and security.
Continuing from Liz, the second part of the question is, can you speak to where the 3 feet distancing recommendation mentioned in the survey came from, and whether or not 3 feet or 6 feet is going to be followed when students return to in-class learning?
So this is one of the changing guidance areas that we have to use to set the new benchmarks. The slideshow that we just showed had those 4 benchmarks that stepped up. We haven't set those benchmarks yet. What we're saying is there's new information. The American Academy of Pediatrics is the organization that established a 3-foot recommendation between students. And the safety of that for younger students, ages 9 or 10 and under, depending on the study that you look at and in the area of the world where you look at that study, those younger elementary students specifically have been shown to cope well as a community in terms of mitigating the pass of COVID with that 3-foot spacing. Now, there's dozens of details to how dense was the population, where was it, how high was the case count in the community, et cetera. But what we're doing is using the Department of Health and Department of Education guidelines and looking at what's realistic and what we feel is realistic in terms of implementing social distancing indoors for our lower elementary students. And so I don't have a committed answer, but the American Academy of Pediatrics is where that guidance came from. That's one of the things we have to assess for safety.
And a real observation that people have made is that it requires constant reminders, and particularly young children just are desperately drawn to one another. And so, you know, it's a habit that has to be continuously emphasized. And I don't think that anyone who works with either preschool children or lower elementary children is going to claim 100% all the time.
Right. Right. And so it's something that we take. I see there's a couple of questions in the chat and in the Q&A about what I'll call fidelity to safety measures. And what we know about safety measures and mitigation is that we should never expect 100% fidelity. What we have to be looking for is high levels of compliance and high levels of corrective behavior change if we're not compliant. So whether that's wearing masks and shields because I know that's safe, or whether that's 6 feet of distance, we want to make sure that we have really clear protocols on site for how to address situations in which the mitigation isn't being measured, because we know it's inevitable. If this was such a dangerous disease that 6 feet turning into 2 feet, or the swapping of air was a guarantee of contagion, we'd be in a much different pandemic. And so I just want to identify that. Overseeing the mitigation practices, the sanitization and cleaning of the school, implementing all of those plans right now is really Wendy's primary work on site, but then all of our primary work as managers and leaders, well, managing, maybe I'm wrong though, Wendy, but
learning, joy, happiness, teacher satisfaction.
Oh, yeah.
Now.
Thank you, Wendy, thank you. I should revise my definition of work. Excuse me for going so far. The behavior changes to comply is what we're going for at all times. And so if there are people not complying and or proper sanitization not happening, that's where the dialogue between you all as the community and what you witness. I mean, everyone is the eyes of the school. Everyone can be the voice or ears of the school, but we got to practice speaking up so that we can improve. So that's our honest, transparent answer.
We have several more questions in the chat and at least one more
Right.
for Q&A. We have a preschool setting that more than one. We have preschool settings that have remained open throughout the pandemic, and parochial and suburban schools that are open at least in part of the fall. Will the new model factor in experience of these settings?
It's my understanding that the MDH and MDE are very much taking into account the data gathered from those situations, not only in the US and not only in the state of Minnesota, but also internationally. So there's now, especially in some of the Asian countries and some of the countries that have, truthfully done a better job than we have, there's more information around how it's working in schools.
Yeah. And so we have that data from not only from other continents, but also locally. And I think the influence of that data and specifically also I'm gathering responses from Montessori environments that have been in person, and really, in all honesty, setting again the safety standards and then the staffing benchmarks really mean that the safety standards have to inform and allow us to staff well. And so the first job is to demonstrate for staff why it's safe with younger students to be on site, and then move forward from there to preparing the learning environment. So those benchmarks are what we're working toward doing. And I just want to be clear, the reason that we don't have a date is because the two things I just mentioned are big work. And so we don't know how long it will take to really set those.
Does anyone know whether the state's December changes to the Safe Learning Plan take into account the B.1.1.7 COVID variant that emerged late last year, which is much more contagious and preliminary seems to have more impact on younger populations?
Yeah, I don't think that information had been emerging yet as more than just anecdotal. So the answer is, I don't think so at all, no.
Yeah, and then secondly, it will be in fact this Thursday afternoon that I'm looking forward to an official answer to all school leaders and superintendents from the Department of Health and Education about how, when, and if that variant information will be combined into how this works. I would say though, as I've been talking through this presentation tonight, I'm trying to be as clear and transparent as possible I know that word transparency can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. I'm trying to share all the information I have in a digestible way when I say this. The developments of new variants, the developments of new anxieties, the developments of yet to be understood ways that this virus or pandemic behaves is part of what we're going to live with, not just for the next couple weeks or until teachers have vaccines, but for many months. And so what we're laying out here is when new information comes out, we will go and look at our benchmarks and adjust them. But we have to be working as hard as we can, as a great Montessorian said to me earlier today, diligently to bring especially our lower L students on site for authentic Montessori education. And so there isn't an agenda where we're going to sacrifice health or safety or input in order to do that. But we all have to understand that we know that our youngest students need to experience Montessori education to really get the benefit of our model. And so this isn't the last new variant that will come out, but we are going to work as hard as we can to incorporate what we know about it into making our decision.
At what point?
All right, so I think it might be time for speed round, Holly. Here
Okay,
we go.
ready? Get set.
I'm ready.
At what point will GRS be requiring students, faculty, and staff to provide documentation they've completed a course of COVID vaccines?
I don't think, because we don't have vaccines available to educators yet, that we are prepared to answer that question.
For
Right.
essential
When we
workers,
find out, our staff will be the first to know, but then everyone will know too. Go ahead, Holly, sorry.
for essential workers that work from home, can kids return to school?
The short answer is not tomorrow, but the longer answer is we are working very hard to make it happen as soon as possible, even as early as next week. And we will be reaching out to folks who have been enrolled and had to go back home.
I have heard that folks will not be asked to be a distance learning guide and an in-person guide. How do we hold this expectation for SPED? Oh no, it left me.
No, I saw it though. Dean and I are working really closely with Lindsay and with Noreen, our special ed coordinator, to make sure that we address that question. It's a really specific question that I assure you, we're working hard to figure out.
What happens when someone in the classroom becomes positive? Does the entire class go back to distance learning for 2 weeks?
Well, so I'll just identify there that just like it says in the presentation, we'll follow all the Department of Health guidelines still for exposure and positive test cases. And so currently, if someone tests positive, we then identify who could have been a close contact, and all of those people have a 14-day quarantine to go through. Now, that guidance could change, but currently that is the guidance, and that's what we'll follow. It depends on if that positive person was a close contact of everyone in the classroom, or if they're in the classroom, and if there's any reason to suspect that the whole classroom does need to quarantine. But even say after vaccination of many people, like all staff, and a return to in-person learning, even next fall, we could still be dealing with 14-day quarantines if there's positive cases, especially of variants. And so yes, is the long answer I gave you, and the short answer is yes.
Yeah, and that's what we've done so far in the 2 cases that occurred.
Okay, back to Q&A. Is Great River considering 5-day in-person learning plans or 4 days in person with Wednesday flexible as a flexible day plan?
So I know that there are, go ahead, Wendy, go ahead.
Sorry, we've been talking about 5-day. Again, we haven't made commitments. We're still working on different modeling. And for critical worker families, we would always have 5-day, even if one of those days was distance learning on site.
Okay, GRS is the only school I have seen that has hand dryers in the hallways rather than inside a bathroom. Given the airborne spread of this disease, will the school be looking into remedying that?
Yeah, we've disabled all of our hand dryers.
Yep.
Okay. Could you say more about the SRC? There's very little information on the website. Do children spend the same amount of time on Zoom calls with classmates and guides as they would at home? Sounds like a benefit for parents, but not for kids who are struggling with online learning? No?
Well, I just want to identify that a larger capacity answer to this question probably is owed with much more time than we have. But Wendy, take a shot at it. and then I think we'll provide better answers, context, schedules, and information, because I think more families will be considering this in the lower L especially.
Yeah, our goal at SRC is to provide an environment that would mirror if you were at home with a family with multiple children, with parents supporting your learning. So yes, they are attending all of their Zoom calls. Yes, they're attending all of their lessons. And then they have adults who are helping them to follow up and choose independent activities or follow-up activities. And they're getting socialization and outdoor playtime, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Okay, a follow-up to that same person's question, no access to classroom materials?
Not right now, but we are working very, very hard to think that through.
And I'll just tag on to this. I see a question about, as you expand staff, will you hire staff that are trained Montessori educators? I will just be honest with you about the absence of those trained Montessori educators to hire currently. So it would be a exceptional, fortuitous miracle if we found trained Montessori educators to hire to expand our SRC. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just describing accurately what it would be if it did. Secondly, what I want to identify is that when we are looking at expanding the staffing for this SRC on site, we're also looking at how we can make it, again, like Wendy said, the most supportive environment for the distance learning. And so, like I heard Wendy allude to there, currently, we don't have classroom materials out because we've been following previous guidance, but we're going to start assessing ways that we can improve that SRC experience immediately, especially for lower L kids.
What Asia countries are you benchmarking? Any outbreak that has occurred where there are over 100 cases a day in school, the school shuts down in Hong Kong and are currently shut down since December?
Wait, I don't. Is
What
that in
Asia countries are you benchmarking? Any outbreak that has occurred?
Oh, well, I'll just chime in there and say in the gathering of information and analysis of the studies that I see on other continents, I believe in Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, I've seen really reliable longitudinal sort of what is the long-term impact on these students and their learning studies that identify really successful mitigation strategies, because many of those places have been back in-person learning longer than North American counterparts. And I think I believe the study I saw was out of Singapore in terms of how if and when, say, quarantining the whole classroom versus the student and the 5 that sat around them was something they could do. Now, that doesn't transfer to our Montessori environment in a Montessori setting necessarily, but I've also seen reliable studies out of Spain, France, England, and so those places are some of the places where I've seen those studies. But I just identify those are contingent, informative things in the background. We're not leveraging a study about one setting in another country to make our decision.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're going by what the Minnesota Department of Health is offering as their guidance, and they're the ones doing, their research through CDC, et cetera. Like we're not, Sam and I aren't like closed in a dark room doing, scholarly research on global COVID response.
No. Which is why the survey is a critical part of how we're able to make a decision that meets needs of students and everyone else. Mm-hmm. I do see a spot here though I'll take the lead on, where it says, we seem to suggest guides are reticent to work because they don't feel prepared, ... Is that accurate? Or are staff reticent because they don't feel safe teaching in a pandemic or safe with protocol or ... So my short answer to that is yes, I'm sure. And my longer answer to that is I don't mean in any way to simplify a reticence to come to work in a school right now to a lack of information. I think that I wanted to identify that with new health guidelines, we have a new job as a school. And again, I think our school has functioned in many ways for many people since its inception 15 years ago. And over the last 6 years as head of school, I've noted that we sometimes act like we're a town, and sometimes act like we're our own municipality, and sometimes act like we're our own pastoral group. And so I just want to identify right now, as a school, we're being asked to assess how we think we can safest learn well. That vocabulary I just used was about as stunted as the benchmark is right now for the new guidance. But in a safe way, how can we learn well? I think we owe it to our teachers to present the best information to them so they can make a decision. And I'm sure there are staff who are reticent because it's a pandemic. And I'm sure there are staff who are reticent because no amount of information is going to make them feel better. And they know they need to keep a job. This is a situation that I don't like being in. And so I just want to take responsibility that I didn't mean to imply in any way that it's just a lack of having the good information. My agenda is to do the best job we can, to give the most accurate information we can, to identify if we can do the best we can to teach kids in person. And if we can't be in person, we're going to be as honest as we can about that too.
Thank you, Sam. Is it possible that a change to the learning format would occur mid-cycle?
Not cycle 3. We have made a commitment to staying in distance learning through cycle 3, which is through the end of February.
Yeah.
And
so no,
we will
the
give
end of cycle 3 is.
Whoops, sorry. And there will be a 6-week start line. You know, we press go 6 weeks before any change happens. So families will know, staff will know, everyone will know 6 weeks at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So 6 weeks from right now is not quite yet the 24th, but in a couple of days it will be. And so we want to just assure everyone that through the 24th, we're distance learning. And then that 6-week window does mean that it could be in the midst of a formal cycle. But we're trying to give
24th of February.
Oh, sorry. I might have misspoken and said the wrong month.
No, you said no month. I don't want anyone to think you're saying January,
okay.
February.
Right. Through February 24th is more than 6 weeks away, and we wanted to assure that. And then we also want to say that that 6-week rolling window is really different from, I've seen some larger school districts and other schools say at the end of a grading period or a grading cycle. And one, I think, real benefit of a Montessori model is we want to meet students' developmental needs in the best way we can as soon as we can. And so 6 weeks ahead of time, I think, is the minimum amount of time we could implement a changed model. And so we're just giving you that 6-week window is the notice that we'll give.
Thank you. Finally, in the chat, Paul summarizes 3 ideas, and he wants to know if these are all correct statements. The first one is, what I am hearing is that we will need to hire folks to administer distance learning on site until we are completely an on-site learning facility. And then we will not need the newly hired staff.
Well, that's not true. That's
okay.
not actually second part, no. First part, yes. Second part, no.
Well, and even I would say we need to hire folks to administer the student support for our Student Resource Center on site so that our guides and assistants can focus on keeping the quality of their education for all the classroom really high. How about part 2, Holly?
Part 2, I hear that we do not have our safety measures set for in school, and we will be observing how others pass-fail to administer in-person learning. I hear, okay. Sorry.
Well, so I'll take the first part of that. We do have safety measures set for in school. We have not incorporated all of the new guidance from the state for elementary students into how we need to change those safety measures or if we can change them and better benefit students. And so us taking our time to move or change models does, as a consequence, mean that we can observe what happens in other school models. Though I guess I would identify that's not a motivating factor, it's a ancillary benefit. Wendy, anything to add?
I'll just say that the latest executive order laid out some new safety guidelines, and that was, 2 days before break. And we have a meeting tomorrow with our on-site staff where we will talk about all of that and then implement them long before we bring more students back on site. So,
so it is accurate.
One thing is the face shields. Really, that's the big thing, is the face shields and the reducing of social distancing. But there's no need to reduce social distancing right now until we bring more students on site. We're going to do the higher distancing.
Right, and so it's accurate to say that we have not incorporated and integrated all of the new information released in that latest executive order change into our safety protocols. We're still using our old and stringent safety protocols for safety on site. I see there's a couple more. Holly, will you read the next one?
Yes, I apologize. I said 3 and misunderestimated the paragraph style. So there's
Go for it.
The third one is, I hear we have answered a survey that several families have changed their answers to, keeping a distance learning model.
That is accurate. That families went in after answering first about in-person and changed their answer to be distant.
Okay, and finally, I hear that we are not a critical worker family, and if we are not a critical working family and we feel our student is not in an ideal learning environment, we may contact you and have our student attend school in person.
It's more nuanced. You contact your level social worker, and the social worker does an assessment of your, works with your student to figure out if there are ways to create some scaffolding around the distance learning to make it more successful, and then decides whether a 504 plan is required, and that the student is really going to need to come on site in order to successfully learn. So it's a little more.
And so specifically, there are some formal steps and some specific educational accommodation rules that we are using and following. And so we just wanted to identify, yes, so that is a correct statement using all of that information that Wendy identified.
And that's it.
Okay. I see a couple I feel like may have been unanswered in the Q&A. I'm going to do a speed round, and then you all tell me to slow down if it becomes unintelligible. So here we go. At 6:37, we have a question of, does the data stating 9-year-olds and younger are contracting the virus at lower rates control for the fact that many of them are not currently in person? Or was that looking at children who are at in-person schools specifically? The data about 9-year-olds and younger contracting the virus at lower rates, my understanding is that there is data about students in person in school and how the virus behaves when it is either the students are exposed or their teacher or family member contracts it. And so some other data though about students and their behaviors, you have to read a little deeper often to find out if it's about a dense setting or not a dense setting of students. Okay, great. Second, here we go. As you expand staff, will you hire trained educators? We will train our educators, but Montessori trained educators. If you know anyone wanting to come on staff, please send them to us. We answered this one about SPED guides. Thank you. We're going to answer, this is another one about the Student Resource Center. I'm just going to identify that. I think we'll work to do a day in the life picture again. It's in the first manual that we sent out, but maybe we can update it more qualitatively now. And then I just want to, the last question that I see here is that in an in-person model, what's the contingency plan if the teachers get COVID? Specifically, we recognize that we have to actually engage with staff to be on staff, not only for the expansion of the Student Resource Center for lower elementary, but likely for the inevitability that when we are in person again, we want those staff to be in-house substitute teachers. And I will just identify, I've said this a little bit the past couple of days, but really clearly here for all of you who are really making it to the last quarter of this event, we will keep those people employed because we need now in-house subs, not just for the next 3 weeks or 3 months, but likely throughout this school year and likely into next school year. So that's where we're looking to address that.
Did
Let's
you
see.
answer the one from Jessica about sanitation?
I think so, about consistency.
Who will be in charge of overseeing the sanitation?
Yeah. So, and that's where I didn't mean to pigeonhole Wendy, but she has a key role in making sure everyone knows and everyone keeps up the standards. But Joy, I'd say Joy is really Wendy's primary focus. It's her job.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, we do. We have air purifiers now. We are doing numerous times a day sanitation. I think our measures have proven to be pretty successful.
Yeah. So we got a follow-up question that's just posted about the data stating 9-year-olds and younger are contracting the virus at lower rates. Does the data about in-person models take into account that many of the in-person schools are operating at lower capacity? So I'll just identify some of the data does, and some of the data does not change or account for that. Specifically, though, what we identify is that there are studies and references from the Department of Health cited where in school settings where many adults have contracted or passed along the virus to each other, the vector is not through their students, but in fact through each other, not having good sanitation or hygiene practices in between. So let's say Holly teaches and I teach the same group of students. I have COVID, Holly comes in to teach my students, does not contract COVID, but Wendy and I say don't distance or aren't wearing masks or shields or aren't using good practices, and we would be passing as adults to each other, but the students weren't the vector from me to student to Holly, right? Now, it sounded weird for me to actually use the three of us. I thought that would be better, but none of us have contracted COVID. And one thing that I see that I mentioned during the presentation, I'll just say maybe to close tonight, would be that we have had cases on site. We have had staff on site who are COVID positive, who develop symptoms even when they're on site. They go home right away, they go get tested, we find out that they tested positive. We have taken successful steps such that with multiple history of COVID cases, we have no history of the COVID case passing between adults or between students and adults on site. And so we are not untested in these waters. We have a reason to be confident that our ability to implement safety measures has been effective. And of course, that doesn't mean we can't improve. We can always improve, but that attitude of continuous improvement is where really we're not only starting from, but we're going to be living in for the next many months of school. And so we got to be, again, working together to make this work. Any closing thoughts, Wendy?
I'm really grateful that you all joined us and asked lots of good questions. It helps us to focus our attention on planning well.
Yeah, for sure. Holly, anything else you'd like to share?
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate all of the voices, matching faces with them. Thank you. We'll be back next Tuesday.
We'll be back next Tuesday. We will do our best actually to start sending out reminders about these evenings and the focus of them too. And I just want to thank again everybody for attending. So bye. Bye, Holly. Bye, Wendy.
There's a question in it. There's a question Q&A.
Oh, okay.
Can you effectively scale those measures you have been taking to prevent transmission?
Will we scale those?
Can you effectively scale those measures you have been taking to prevent transmission?
I believe so,
Yeah.
Yes.
And being very clear about how we do that is, I would say, the primary work of setting that new clear benchmark. So our previous clear benchmark publicly was cases per 10,000 and these safety measures. And now what we have to do is incorporate testing, the new safety measures for masks and shields and all the filters and all the things that we have on site. And then thirdly, making it really clear, I would just want to identify, how do we continue to live with the presence of the virus? So we're not planning that it's just going to go away and we stop. We're planning on long-term safety measures that we continue to implement regularly.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.